Like many folks who saw Clair Obscur Expedition 33's reveal trailer last year, our first thoughts are along the lines of, get that gorgeous looking battle system into our veins, stat. And at long last, we've been able to sample an early chunk of Sandfall Interactive's upcoming action RPG for ourselves, playing around the first 3.5 hours of the game after its opening prologue. At this stage in the game, the titular expedition team have left their hometown of Lumiere behind and set off on what everyone assumes will be a one-way trip to try and defeat the evil being known as the Paintress, who lives on a faraway island visible from the shores of Lumiere and who keeps wiping out swathes of their friends by drawing eerie numbers on a large pillar. 33 is the latest number to get scrawled out on the continent, and it's since wiped out everyone who's 33 years old, including expedition leader Gustav's love interest, Sophie. But the team's arrival on the shores of the continent to try and break this tragic cycle of death and eventual extinction have gone awry. A mysterious but intensely hostile old man, a sight unheard of for these young explorers, suddenly wipes out most of their squad right off the bat, leading Gustav and a handful of other survivors to scrabble for a hasty retreat.
Fall back! Come on, we need to go!
We pick up with Gustav in an ethereal forest, where high rock walls and bioluminescent flowers guide us forward toward our first main goal, a place called the Indigo Tree, your team's designated meetup point if your arrival went south. Along the way down these beautiful, albeit linear gullies, we were able to get to grips with Clair Obscur's frankly stupendous combat system. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about what happens between battles, as this is arguably what we've seen the least of during its various trailers so far, and which sadly left us a little cold after our playthrough. It's not all bad news, we should say. There are hints of greatness here, which we'll get to shortly, but early on at least, we could feel our enthusiasm for the game starting to wane every time we weren't in a fight. The world itself looks stunning, no doubt about it. When we finally broke through the thick foliage of the trees, an enormous cliff view opened up, revealing huge, jagged rocks hanging curiously in the air, all pointed towards that ominous 33 etched pillar. The ghostly canopy of the indigo tree also draped itself across the sky like an otherworldly Erd tree from Elden Ring.
Interesting.
Later, we explored a coral reef area where everything behaved like it was underwater, but it was actually just regular air. Plumes of seaweed rippled upwards towards the sky, large fish bristled through the dense undersea thickets overhead, and bubbles lazily bobbed along in front of our face. It's the kind of visual splendour that really punches above its weight, considering Sandfall's comparatively small team size, and the temptation to coo over the sheer majesty of it all from a distance is strong in the extreme.
This will be useful.
But when it comes to traversing these rich, dense spaces, it's essentially dead-end nooks and crannies, the game, but without the aid of a minimap to guide you through its warren of branching avenues. We should say that noodling down these paths is almost always worth it, as there was always some glowing trinket to pick up at the end of it, white orbs signifying more common items such as chroma currency,
Well, that will help.
while rarer purple orbs sometimes doled out buff-boosting picto-armor or chroma catalysts that can be used to upgrade your weapons, to name just a couple.
Great.
These items were regularly guarded by fierce enemies too, and even those that seemed free for the taking would often become ambush traps, forcing you to fight your way back to the main path. All fine stuff on the face of it, but the act of trying to find a way forward, coupled together with some truly excessive motion blur that we couldn't disable for the life of us in this particular build, made navigating these lush environments more of a chore than we were expecting. It's exactly the kind of cocktail that puts our collectible FOMO obsession into overdrive, a feeling we don't mind indulging as long as we know where the main path is at all times. But Clair Obscur infuriatingly forgoes any kind of map to help orient you in these large and imposing settings, and repeatedly running into brick walls and doubling back on ourselves began to grate as the preview build went on. One thing we weren't expecting though was a kind of central overworld hub connecting all these disparate environments together. After defeating the boss monster of the forest, for example, we stepped through a portal that brought us to an area that felt like we were stepping out onto Hyrule Field in Ocarina of Time again, or the plains outside Midgar from the original Final Fantasy VII. With the camera pulled back and Gustav looming large over a cartoonishly small rendition of the world at large, it conjured the best kind of feeling we could hope for in a modern game. Like that feeling of playing a PS1 Final Fantasy game, just with the sumptuous detail and lighting of an Octopath Traveler diorama.
The message said head north, to the weird corals.
And a door in a hut.
We also spied shortcuts and obstacles here that needed to be unlocked before we'd be able to push further into other areas of the island. Other higher level areas also had big red warning signs flagged up as we approached them, though that didn't stop us from having a go at them anyway, just to try our luck. This overworld hub is a place we suspect we'll be returning to often throughout Clair Obscur, dipping into its numerous discrete locations to further the story and then returning to explore another area with the knowledge gained from our previous steps. Indeed, a teaser montage at the end of the preview also hinted at being able to travel by air and sea in this area once you'd unlocked the requisite skills and characters.
This is a much better way to travel.
And we can see how this meshing of Metroidvania tropes with the bones of its core RPG could be very appealing indeed.
Nice.
We found ourselves thinking, we want to play that version of Clair Obscur, as what we played just now felt very limited and narrow in scope. Granted, our preview was just an early section of the very first act, blinkers are to be expected then, but we just wish Sandfall Interactive would deign to give us a map to help us see it in all its glory, rather than eschewing any kind of HUD or UI completely when outside of battle. And wow, those battles, what a triumph. We couldn't wait to get back into the thick of it a lot of the time, as its turn-based combat just felt so light on its feet. Each party member, for example, has a pool of action points to spend each turn, which deplete when you perform special attacks or use free aim ability to shoot glowing enemy weak points from afar, but accrue with regular ones. But the way each character's individual skill sets twist and build on this basic premise brings heaps of tactical thinking to the forefront of your battle plan. Gustav, for instance, has a special power called Overcharge, which lets him unleash a devastating lightning attack with his mechanical left arm, provided you've accrued enough charge by performing other special attacks first, that is. Lune, meanwhile, is more of a magic user, and her elemental attacks will leave elemental stains that can then be consumed by other attacks for additional damage. The more abilities you unlock, the more you start to think how well they might synergize with each other, and even at this early stage there were plenty of potential combo opportunities that really rack up the damage. But it was Mayel who really ratcheted up the tension here, as her attacks are all centered around one stance flowing into the next, accruing more and more bonuses and effects, provided you can keep the chain unbroken. This creates a constant dance between different flow states. Her offensive stance will boost her attacks but leave her open to more damage, for example, while swapping into a defensive stance will bolster her defense at the cost of attack power. If a foe is burning, however, which you might have achieved by using her fiery spark attack during her defensive stance, you can switch to her 200% damage dealing virtuose stance, the pinnacle of Mayel's attack triangle in the preview, and a real pièce de résistance that feels intensely gratifying to unleash after building up to it across several turns. It's even more delicious if you manage to perfectly counter an enemy while in virtuose stance too, as players are given the chance to either dodge or parry every single attack that comes their way via time-based button presses. The timing is pretty hard to nail on its default difficulty, but there's nothing more satisfying than parrying an attack 3 times in a row and then watching your squad, either individually or all together if it's a group assault, pull off the biggest middle finger counterattack we've seen in a game in a very long time. It's truly tremendous stuff, and it's all executed with a real eye for neat visual flourishes that make you go hell yeah at the TV. Even the Persona games can't measure up to the level of showmanship on display here, and we simply couldn't get enough of it. It's this combat that still makes us excited for Clair Obscur Expedition 33, but please, for the love of all that's holy, we're gonna need a goddamn map if we're ever going to be as thrilled by the exploration side of the game. Just like the ever-present 33 painted pillar on the horizon, we can clearly see the brilliance lying at the heart of this game. We just hope that its final release on April the 24th won't get too bogged down in the tedium of navigation to let us appreciate it in all of its glory. Thank you so much for watching this preview of Clair Obscur Expedition 33. If you enjoyed it, please do like this video, subscribe to Eurogamer for almost daily videos about video games, and before you go, consider clicking on one of these other preview videos that are on screen and clickable right now. Goodbye.